I'm Jolene Wynn, and this is the Porn Addict's Wife podcast, episode number 207, Emotional Overcorrecting.
If your husband is struggling with a pornography problem and you want some help with it and you are not finding the resources that you like, you are in the right place. My name is Jolene Wynn. I am a certified life coach. I am an active member of the LDS faith, and I am the wife of a former porn addict. And on this podcast, I am going to share with you the tools that you need in order to start your healing journey. This is where I'm going to show you how to dive deep into intentional living, how to rekindle connection with your spouse, how to manage all that emotional turmoil that you're feeling, how to break the addiction cycle that you have to your husband's addiction, and tell you all of the ways to do that and start healing. I'm so glad that you're here, and I can't wait to get started. Let's go.
Hello, my ladies. Welcome back to the podcast. I am so excited to be talking to you guys today. And let's just give a little shout out to all the moms. Happy Mother's Day. Yesterday was Mother's Day, and I got to chat with my mom. I got to text my mother-in-law and just think about all the amazing women in my life. My kids were so sweet. They made me breakfast in bed. They do this every year. And my husband and I were trying to think yesterday about when that started. And I think my oldest was maybe 4 or 5 when she started doing breakfast in bed for me. And she would just do toast, or she would bring me a protein bar and a bottle of water. And it was the cutest thing. And it has graduated to an egg sandwich, which I eat every morning. And I am just in love with all my babies. They were so cute. I put a video on Instagram. My husband took a video yesterday of them coming in and giving me breakfast in bed and all their homemade cards. And it's my favorite thing ever. And then, of course, we went to church and they hand out like those little flyers, those little pieces of paper that are like, my mom is blank years old. Her favorite color is blank. And I love those things. Those are my favorite. And I love looking at them throughout the years, because obviously the answer that my 6-year-old gives is very different than the answer that my 12-year-old gives. But the one they all struggled with is what my favorite color is, because I don't even know that I have a favorite color. But they did pretty well. I really like white and black, and so most of them guessed that. My husband said mauve, although he can't pronounce mauve, so he always says mauve, but that's pretty good too. And I do like gold. So there's just so many that I like. I don't know if I have a favorite. It could probably be white. And there was one question that made me crack up, which was, my mom always says blank. And, my 6-year-old said, my mom always says, I love you. And my 7-year-old son said, my mom always says, no, but thank you for asking. Which is so accurate. If you guys hung out with me while I was parenting for even 24 hours, you would know that that's what I say. When my kids ask me something and my answer is no, I will say no, but thank you for asking. And I do mean that genuinely. It's not just an automatic reply. I do mean, I appreciate you asking me, but the answer is no. And that's what he said. My mom always says no, but thank you for asking. So that was so fun. And then my husband and kids made dinner and cleaned it all up. And it was a beautiful, beautiful Mother's Day. I am a little bit sick, as you guys can hear in my voice. I lose my voice so much, ladies. You guys know. But I've been a little bit sick this weekend, but I got some extra rest, and it was just a great Mother's Day. So I hope you guys had a great Mother's Day too. Today, ladies, I want to talk about emotional overcorrecting. And this was inspired because I think it was last week or maybe the week before, my husband and I were on the way to church, and we were driving, and I was not paying attention to the road like he does because he's driving. I'm sitting in the passenger seat, probably putting on a pair of shoes and talking to the kids, making sure everybody else has shoes on. We're just a few minutes down the road, and all of a sudden my husband swerves. And then he swerves to the right because there was a car that was coming. Now, I didn't see this. He told me this later. There was a car coming and it was veering into our lane. So he swerved to the right to avoid getting hit by that car. But then he overcorrected, trying to get back onto the road, and ended up making more of a hassle or more of a jolt or reaction from overreacting, trying to get back on the road, get back into the middle of the lane, than if he had just, corrected regularly. And this is something that happens a ton with driving, right? is we swerve to avoid something, and often it's the overcorrecting. We're trying to get back to the middle, but because our adrenaline is so high, because our reaction is to try and okay, and now our brain says, oh my gosh, I'm so far off, I have to get back. We end up doing it too hard. We turn the steering wheel too much. We go too fast. And that's what actually ends up creating more of a problem often than the initial swerve in the first place. Now, I'm not saying you shouldn't swerve. If someone is coming at you when you're driving, yes, you should, if you see them coming, swerve, try and, avoid the collision. But sometimes we unintentionally create more of a problem from our overcorrecting than we did in the first place, okay? And I want to talk about that emotionally. I immediately, when my husband did this a couple weeks ago on the way to church, we sat there and I just started thinking, oh my goodness, we do this so much in our lives emotionally. And so I'm super excited to talk to you guys about this today, okay? The problem comes at you, whatever the problem is, and you swerve to avoid it. So think about whatever emotional problem that is. Maybe it's your husband struggling with pornography. Maybe it's a child. Maybe it's a relationship. Maybe it's a circumstantial shift, right? The problem comes at you and you swerve to avoid it. Again, that's not bad. It's not bad to swerve to try and avoid it. But in an attempt to get back, you overcorrect. And it's often that action that creates the accident. So I'm going to go through several examples today that'll help solidify this and maybe give you a clue so you can start seeing or noticing if you're doing this in your own life, okay? The first example that came to my mind is with your parents, okay? I see this all over the place. So many parents, like when you start parenting, when you think about how you were raised and you think about what your parents did, so many of you struggle with how your parents raised you. You don't like the way that your dad talked to you. You don't like how your mom made you do X, Y, and Z. And because you don't like that, because you are saying that that is negative, then your brain overcorrects and swings to the exact opposite, right? We say, my parents did it this way, so I'm never going to do it that way. You guys heard this? When I grow up and I have kids, I'm never going to do X, Y, and Z, right? That is like so common. But the problem with this is that when we say that, we give up the positive things that our parents did. Okay? We write it off as all completely negative. We say, I'm never going to be like my parents. If we have a negative thought or feeling or story about our parents and we don't look at it with a lens of curiosity and we aren't willing to take something from it, we want to completely write it off and swing in the opposite direction or emotionally overcorrect. So here's what that looks like. Let's say that your parents were very disciplinary, okay? And you hated it as a kid and you felt like you were always in trouble and you could never do anything right. Then emotional overcorrecting might look like swinging to the exact opposite and saying, I'm never going to discipline my kids because I hated it when my parents did it. Does this make sense? We're swinging from one extreme to the other. We're saying, I don't like what my parents did. I have this story, but in order to keep that story, then we can't take anything positive from what they did. We have to have it all be negative, which means we can't emulate it at all. We can't copy anything from it because if we do, then that means that we're just like them. Okay, do you guys see the problem with this? So then what it does is it hinders us from actually taking anything positive from that experience. Because the truth is, ladies, is that it was probably more like 50-50. Maybe there was some positive, but there was probably some negative and some positive in what your parents were doing. And when we only keep the story that it was 100% negative, we can't take anything from it because then we're just like them. So what we do is we emotionally overcorrect. We have the story that our parents and everything that they did was wrong, and so we can't do anything that they did. So we overcorrect and do nothing that they did. When the reality is that it was probably more like there could have been probably some things that were positive. Maybe there were a few things that they disciplined on that were actually okay to discipline on. Maybe they disciplined, but you don't like how they disciplined. Maybe that's what we keep instead. Instead, we often swing to the exact opposite, and that is a struggle, again, because we end up creating a different set of problems. Okay, like when you don't discipline your children at all, then you have a bunch of kids who are completely undisciplined and they don't listen to you and whatever else problems that ends up creating, right? So in an effort not to be your mom and not to have the relationship that you had with your mom or feel like how you did, now you have a struggle in that you can't parent your children because you don't know how to discipline them because you can't be like your parent. Is this making any sense, you guys? It made total sense in my head. Let's do some more examples, okay? Let's do another one from, let's say, your marriage, okay? And this is coming off of that episode that I did a couple weeks ago that said if you just don't care anymore. This is one where I often see emotional overcorrecting, right? It's where you care and you invest so much into your relationship, into your marriage, and then you reach a point where you say it's too hard to care anymore. So instead of saying, I still care, it's just hard, you say, all right, I was caring, but now it's too hard, and now I'm just not going to at all, right? I was putting in all the effort, and it's hard, and so then you decide to stop putting in any effort at all until he starts doing what you want him to. Does this make sense? Does this sound familiar? Right? This is emotional overcorrecting. I have invested so much emotionally into my marriage and it's so hard. I've decided I'm not investing anything else at all. That's the overcorrecting until I start seeing him putting in some effort, whatever I think that looks like. Does this make sense? Right? It's not even allowing for the 50-50 in the middle where you say, all right, how do I actually want to invest? What is it that I'm actually willing to do? You just say, I'm cutting this off and I'm swinging in the opposite direction. I was investing. I've decided that was too hard. And so now I'm not going to invest at all. And I totally understand why we do this. We get emotionally spent. The reason why we emotionally overcorrect is because we're headed in a certain direction and it's too hard. It becomes emotionally draining, typically because we aren't processing the emotions that are going through at the time. We aren't looking at the thoughts that are creating this. We aren't looking at the story that we're telling about it. And so we emotionally exhaust ourselves. Most of the time, it comes from us trying to control an outcome that isn't actually in our control. And so we get so burnt out and so exhausted. We're not taking care of ourselves. And so then we have to swing. It feels like we have to swing the other direction because we don't have an option. Our brain says, I can't keep going how I have been going. So the alternative is I have to go in the complete opposite, right? This is where we go from having a lot of hope to feeling hopeless. We emotionally overcorrect. We swing in the opposite direction. We have a lot of hope until the upteenth time that he's relapsed, and then that's too hard anymore. And so our brain says, this is too hard. I just can't even have hope anymore, right? Or maybe it's going from obsessing about your husband's behavior, having a lot of anxiety about his behavior, about always constantly checking his phone, monitoring the Wi-Fi, worrying about what he's doing and when he's doing it, and constantly double checking every story that he ever tells. And that gets so exhausting. And then you just have to swing to apathy. You just say, you know what? I just can't even care anymore because I was so obsessed with it. That's too hard. I can't continue. And I have to swing to the opposite direction. That's emotionally overcorrecting. Or maybe it might look like to being super invested to then becoming like uninterested. I see this so often as I will get so many messages from you guys on Instagram or what have you, emails about how you've invested so much into this relationship and you want to work with me and you want to come coach with me and you want to join my program, but you're just not even sure that you want to put any more effort into the relationship. You guys with me on this? Does it sound familiar? So many messages, ladies, I get from you. And here's my response to that too, which is just a little bit of a tangent, is that coaching isn't about your relationship necessarily. I had a coach one time coach me on this, and he was like talking about building a brand and a business, and he's like, yeah, but your whole purpose is to keep people married, right? Isn't that what you want? Like, that's what you should be advertising, is how to keep people together. And I said, well, not necessarily. My goal in coaching is always to help you as the individual. It's about your relationship with yourself, about improving that, about emotional resilience, about the confidence to face anything in the future. And I was like, they get to decide whether they stay with their marriage or not. That's not up to me. Many times I have clients most of my clients stay with their spouse because that's what they desire. Great. But I'm never going to tell somebody that they should or shouldn't get divorced. And my whole goal isn't to keep your marriage together. My whole goal is your personal growth, your personal healing. So when you think about it that way, like that thought of I've invested so much into this relationship, I want to coach with you, but I'm not even sure I want to invest more into the relationship. It's not investing into your marriage. I mean, it is if that's what you want. but it's more about your investment into your personal relationship with yourself. Now, through that and through the improvement of that and the healing of that, will that improve your marriage? 100%. It's inevitable, but you still get to decide whether or not you stay. That was just a little bit of a tangent. My thoughts went elsewhere. So that's what we do. We emotionally overcorrect from being like invested to just saying, you know what, I don't even care anymore. I'm not even putting in any more effort, right? It's where we go from being very loving to swinging all the way into indifference. Does that sound familiar? It's like we love this person so much, and then that becomes too hard. And it's not that we don't love them anymore. We don't become unloving. It's that our brain then says, this is too hard. I am sharing too much. It's too vulnerable for me to continue this way. And so it swings into indifference. And again, that's a lie, which I talked about last week on the podcast, or a couple weeks ago when we talked about I just don't care anymore. That's actually a lie, because the truth is that you do care. And recognizing this, ladies, is actually the most powerful. I want you guys to notice that there is a middle ground. When we emotionally overcorrect, we're swinging from one opposite to the other. And I want to offer that there is a middle ground of acceptance. And that's where we take a step back and we look at the story and we recognize that it probably isn't all or nothing. Our brain likes to operate in extremes because it makes things very clear. However, we have to tell a story in order for it to be extreme. Okay, we have to tell a story that our husband is this terrible guy in order for us to validate or justify how we can behave this way toward him now. Does that make sense? Because if we keep the story that he's a really nice guy with problems, then it becomes much harder to struggle or to sit with the apathy that we feel. It becomes much harder to sit with the indifference. It becomes much harder to sit with our lack of desire to invest in the relationship. Right? So instead we have to keep the story about how he's so terrible and we're never going to get past this, and how he's hurt us too many times and your relationship just can't come back from this, or he hasn't put any effort into this. Whatever the story is that you're telling, that story is what is creating the emotional overcorrecting. So we need to take a step back and start looking at the story, start looking at how we are responding, and start questioning if that's actually the way that we want to respond. Because often our emotional overcorrection, again, it creates more of a problem than the thing itself in the first place. It's our response to him lying. It's our response to him relapsing. It's our response to our parents parenting the way that they parented, right? It's our response to the circumstances that we face when we overcorrect emotionally that creates more of a problem than if we had just faced it head on in the first place. Does this make sense? Are you ladies with me? I was talking to my sister about this a couple days ago and she was like, this makes so much sense, but I don't know, because I don't have any feedback from you guys live, that I don't know if this is making sense. I'm hoping it's making sense to you. I just want to offer that you take a look. Where am I emotionally overcorrecting? Am I not allowing myself to see anything positive? Am I dropping one emotion for the complete opposite? Because that'll be a huge indicator, right? It's like if you went from hopeful to hopeless, right? Notice where I used to feel that way and I don't anymore. And instead I feel the complete opposite, is a very good indication that you have done some emotional overcorrecting. And the way to solve this is to come work with me and I'll help you figure out why you're doing that. Most of the time it is simply from a self-protection mechanism. Your brain has decided it's too vulnerable, it's too emotionally painful to continue the way that I've been going. And so it thinks that the only option is to swing to the opposite, and that's not true. Take the positive and the negative, allow it to be 50-50, and allow yourself to accept how you actually feel. Sometimes I do feel helpless, sometimes I do feel hopeless, but sometimes I can allow myself to hope, and that feels scary. Sometimes I can acknowledge what I do have control over, and that feels scary, because with it comes the acknowledgement of what I don't. That's what our brain doesn't like. Our brain doesn't like the 50-50. Our brain would rather have it be one or the other, but one or the other is not where reality is, ladies. And most of the time, it's creating more of a problem. So I want to offer that you take a look at that this week, see where you're emotionally overcorrecting, and start to come back to the middle. All right, ladies, I love you all so much, and I'll see you guys next week on a brand new episode, so take care.
All right, ladies, if you enjoyed this podcast, then I want to invite you to come join my coaching program. This is where we take everything on the podcast and we actually get to apply it in order to transform your life. And I know that is a big promise, but it's 100% true. On the podcast, it's like learning how to ride a bike. It's like reading a book, an instruction manual via audio on how to ride a bike. And my coaching program is where you actually ride the bike. And that is what creates the transformation. This is what actually enables you to go from point A to point B, to actually create the transformation that you are seeking. If you are feeling stuck, if you are feeling like you are loving everything, but you just can't see the end from where you are now, then I want to help you. Come work with me one-on-one. I have a lifetime access program, which means it doesn't expire. You come work with me, I will help you every step of the way and work with you personally to make sure that you get where you want to go. I can't wait to see you there. Head to my website today, joleneWynn.com, and sign up.